Jinpachi Ego was tasked with creating a World Cup-worthy Japanese striker. He believes that the striker must be a hyper-competitive egoist. Due to the culture of Japan, a striker will be unlikely to arise. Therefore, he curates the conditions to make them. Enter Bluelock. Bluelock is a prison-like facility where ostensibly 300 talented strikers from high schoolers all over Japan are isolated and pitted against each other. The sole survivor of this will earn the right to become Japan's national striker. Those who are defeated will be gone and banned from joining the team ever again. It is with the conditions inherent to the structure of the show and the ideas espoused by the characters where we learn a lot about what it means to compete and win. One of the elements of the show is the idea of a monster. Some people have this monster in them. The monster is an animalistic instinct that gives athletes deep connection and rhythm to their game. It's a ravenous beast that manifests itself when there's an intense desire and hunger to win. All of your senses are heightened and your performance increases. When the animal manifests, it accentuates and bolsters the person's inherent strengths.
But one of the things that athletes talk about a lot is what they call the voice. I will get directions, right, left, do this, do that, and it's very quick. You either do what the voice is telling you to do, or you tend to crash.
So, how can we create this monster for ourselves? How can we develop this insatiable appetite for winning? The tips I'm going to give you might be tailored towards sports, but by no means are they only applicable for sports. Anyone who wants to become the best at their craft could gain something from this video. So, the first thing I can think of is to remove yourself from a lot of pleasures. This forces you to derive pleasures from the task at hand. This makes it such that succeeding is tantamount to living itself. It is so easy to derive pleasure in our society, so getting rid of some of your dopamine triggers will force you to truly work on something and derive pleasure that way. So yes, try and stop mindlessly looking at your phone, stop looking at pornography, period, and channel that newfound energy you have, that newfound desire to replace that dopamine source with something that's physically and mentally strenuous that you really want to get good at. There's a reason that a lot of top-level athletes come from humble beginnings. In short, they were in an environment where they had no choice but to succeed. We emulate that by artificially giving ourselves no choice but to succeed. Ego does this by isolating the athletes in Bluelock. The characters aren't allowed to leave, and thus they aren't allowed to gain pleasure from anything else besides winning in soccer. And to accentuate this, Ego gaslights them into believing that they're actually worse than they are. He makes them believe that there are 300 players there and that they're among the worst of the 300 players, but in reality the scope is a lot smaller. This drives them to think that they have an insurmountable mountain to climb.
But because you were convinced you were at the very bottom of the pile, you fought through the first selection filled with fervor and desperation. A necessity to instill each of you with the hunger to become the best in the world. There was no other way. For example, let's take Noel Noah. He's currently considered the best striker in the world, but he grew up in a slum in France. Surrounded by crime and poverty, the only way to change his fate was with a ball. Soccer was literally the only chance he had to escape his predicament.
This reminds me of why religious people fast. And fittingly, around the time I'm recording this today, it's actually the beginning of Lent, so if you're a Christian, this is also especially pertinent to you. Depriving yourself of certain things, like food for example, will bring into focus your need to depend on God. Similarly, depriving yourself from some external force of dopamine will force you to develop a voracious appetite for victory in whichever domain you're training for. The need to experience pleasure is definitely the most immediate and selfish intrinsic motivator. And since we are a selfish species who is used to receiving pleasure immediately, this will inspire a hungry animal within you that has to be continually fed. Extrinsic motivators like Naruhaya's desire to feed for his family are good, but they are insufficient to awaken the beast. The beast itself is an internal creature when you watch the show, so it only makes sense that there needs to be internal motivators that awaken it. Depriving yourself of pleasure will augment the inner need for satisfaction and dopamine, and that is exactly what we will need to awaken the killer inside of you. Every time you complete your goal, big or small, that inner killer in you levels up. You are training yourself to embrace discomfort. In order to be the best that you can be, you gotta push yourself and even be cruel to yourself sometimes. Most people aren't willing to do this. And part of this, again, is because of the way we live. We haven't conditioned ourselves to work for pleasure or satisfaction. It's not uncommon to see TikToks or Reddit posts about why we shouldn't even work for anything. And of course, many people say this in their air-conditioned home with high-speed internet. We are the beneficiaries of the hard work our ancestors went through, yet are complaining when we have to do some effort to actually maintain it. Complaining about the work that we have to do is a uniquely first-world problem. For everyone else, it's pretty much the equivalent of complaining about the fact that you have to breathe. For much of human history, you were forced to directly contribute to your survival. And I mean every day from dawn till dusk, and when the sun drops, you fall asleep dead tired only to get back up and do it again. Now to be clear, the fact that we don't have to do this anymore is a good thing. But it has made people lose or perhaps not able to cultivate that fire in them that leads them to perform as if their life depends on it. The second tip I have is to put yourself under a lot of pressure.
If you get nervous in front of the goal, you're not cut out to be a striker.
As the famous proverb goes, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. People with killer instincts love challenges. They see it not as a hindrance but a way to prove themselves, like Bachida getting excited and scoring after being down 3-0 against Team V.
Wait a sec, don't tell me you're scared. In a desperate situation, don't be frightened, cause that's when things get exciting!
Bluelock is a closed environment where you're only with people who also want to succeed. We all know of that famous quote, you're the aggregate of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So surround yourself with people who also want to succeed. But that's only one part of it. The main part I want to get at is how you need to be continually under pressure. Everyone in Bluelock is under constant 24/7 pressure to succeed. It's not just that they're around other soccer players, but they're around other soccer players who are directly competing against them. So for yourself, put yourself under pressure, feel what it's like to be under a lot of pressure, that way you can handle it when more truly pressurous situations occur. That way feeling pressure isn't a new occurrence to you. This can be like betting money on a pickup basketball game. And part of what makes monsters, part of what makes killers, is the ability to perform under pressure. That way you act instinctually when the time comes. Kobe Bryant is often criticized for copying Michael Jordan all the time. This is because he does. He has routined Michael Jordan's moves to such an extent that he instinctually copies them, all the way down to the smallest of details. Even just look at the celebrations Kobe has after making game winners. They're identical to that of Michael Jordan. It isn't so much that Kobe has a genetic trait that makes him better under pressure, it's that he's practiced what he would do under pressure so often. Kobe has practiced his game-winning shots so often that he's able to do them instinctually. Bluelock is a survival of the fittest anime. It's akin to a group of pit bulls fighting for the last piece of food. They bite, snare, and choke each other to get it, and they will rarely ever feel bad for winning and trampling on their opponent when doing so. In episode 5, after Isagi scored, he looks down on his opponents and feels nothing after making them lose and crushing their dreams. He only cares about winning the game. Monsters have this vindictive edge where they absolutely do not care about how their opponent feels. The field is by no exaggeration a battlefield of war for them. To them, it is succeed or essentially die.
Let me guess. You still think this is a sport, don't you know? This is a battlefield. Losing at soccer means losing the reason for my existence. In other words, defeat's the same as dying. This doesn't represent a sport. To me, it's a fight to the death.
This is the sort of raspy language coaches use to inspire their athletes. In the book Why Men Hate Going to Church, David Morrow states, "Deep down, men long for a harsh affection. The love of a coach who yells at his players to give every ounce of effort. The love of a drill sergeant who pushes his recruits to the limits of human excellence. The love of a teacher who demands the impossible from his students." Bluelock understands this. You have to temporarily forego kindness and see your opponents as enemies. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't exercise sportsmanship. Far from it. After games, before games, even during the games, don't cheat or get needlessly violent. In case it needs to be reiterated, we're still trying to win at sports, this isn't actual war. But during the games, thinking about it like it's some sort of fight for survival can actually be a morally good thing to do. To be in competition brings both parties to a higher level of competence than they otherwise would have been without the competition. I think it is actually more sportsmanlike to push your opponents beyond their limits. Assuming, of course, that they are deathly serious about achieving their goals. It's like Mihawk ultimately using Yoru to cut Zoro at the end of their fight when a pocket knife would have done fine. It's saying that you respect them as a player and thus you take them seriously. It is more sportsmanlike to take your opponent seriously, even if you completely overwhelm them, than it would be to style and joke around with them. When I used to play Smash Bros and play against someone who was far clear in a ways better than me, I would get somewhat upset if they'd switch to use their secondaries, their characters that they would never use in tournament, against me. Even if it was less kind, I wanted to be taken seriously because at the time I wanted to be the best. And I know a lot of you felt the same way. I talk about this more in my upcoming book, Muscular Christianity, if you're interested. The book is about physical, mental, and spiritual discipline and excellence. It's a project I've been working on for almost 2 years. The book should hopefully, Lord willing, be releasing this summer. The third point I want to make here is that killers are divergent thinkers. They are unafraid of change if it means ultimate development. They are geniuses in adaptability. In the book Range by David Epstein, he explains how most successful people have a corpus of knowledge that they've gained through working in disparate fields and then coalesce them into the career of choice. When you are single-mindedly focused on your craft, everything you do becomes tied to that fact. The job you have, the books you read, they all become relevant to your ultimate goal. In Bluelock, Isagi goes through an identity crisis after losing to Rin's team. He realizes that his skill of spatial awareness only really works in a team setting. But due to the constraints of the competition, he's often put in one-on-one situations. With his back against the wall, he begins to connect a bunch of dots. He learns to understand the limitations of eyesight and blind spots thanks to Rin. He learns about how the off-ball plays are just as important as the on-ball ones. He uses these ideas to ultimately realize he can copy Naruhaya's technique, make it better, and win. Isagi is able to destroy his previously held conceptions of himself and completely remake himself. He's able to infinitely adapt to any situation. This sort of reconstruction can be done by you by developing an aptitude for many different areas, then consolidating all the knowledge and experience that you've gained from them into your ultimate expertise. We have so far talked about 3 ways to develop your monster. First, to deprive yourself of pleasures, second, to put yourself in stressful situations, and third, to view everything as a library for improvement. The 4th one I'll talk about is the flow state. Or, more precisely, I'll be talking about how flow can coalesce these 3 techniques into a more palatable format. So first of all, what is flow? The flow state is an optimized state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. It is effortless effort. According to Stephen Kotler, the golden rule of flow is that we pay more attention to the challenge at hand when it slightly exceeds our skill set. It isn't too easy as to bore you, but isn't too hard as to overwhelm you. It also isn't below you, because if it was below you, it wouldn't push you to become better. So it's just slightly above you. It's the equivalent of pushing yourself to lift 5 more pounds on the bench press.
If I don't challenge myself, I can't evolve!
The most basic human motivator is curiosity. When we're curious about something, we don't have to put extra energy in order to pay attention to it. Another thing to help you stay motivated is passion. So we can mix the two. We can look at what we're curious about and relate them to what we're passionate about. I talk about that in my video about how to stay motivated like an anime character. Stephen Kotler in his book Art of the Impossible states that we should allot 90 minutes a day to give our full attention on something. 90 minutes to single-mindedly focus on a task. Remove your phone, turn off email notifications, etc. Both flow and the killer instinct, or monster, are similar and play into each other. The prime difference in my estimation is that flow takes time, effort, and motivators to turn on, whereas the killer instinct is born of a disciplined mind. Flow is a process of altering your conscious to get into the zone. The killer instinct is a tenacious mentality that exists regardless of the situation. It is in your best interest to optimize both. And that'll be it for the video. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.